Welcome to the Real Deal Media presents 9/11, Real Deal Remembers. The 20 years later, 20th anniversary is today. Who would have thought? 20 years. Can you believe it? I mean, unbelievable. Anyways, welcome. I'm your host for this evening, Dean Ryan, and you have tuned into a day of remembrance of one of the darkest days in American history and one of the darkest days in world history, and that's September 11th, 2001. So today we're going to do something very unique. We have our very own Real Deal Media Politico, TJ, joining us this evening, and we're going to be joined by some other surprise guests as the evening goes on. We're going to have a UK perspective of the 9/11 day that will live in infamy. But we're also going to do something a little different. Maybe you haven't seen in quite some time. TJ and myself, we're going to talk about what life was like pre 9/11 in that kind of world, in the build up to 9/11. We're going to kind of go through those timelines, where we were in our own lives and what the country was like, what the news feed and cycles were like. So this can be a historical document for the younger generation who will never know a world that has not had a boot on their neck due to 9/11, who have never known a world that doesn't have a mask on their face. So we're going to paint that picture. Then we're going to get into the day itself, go over the mysterious deaths of the witnesses, like the maid of Marvin Bush, the brother of George, and all the red herrings and the anomalies that we've all heard over the years. We're going to brush through those, and then we're going to close with the parallels of the pandemic war today that we're faced with and the 9/11 event itself, and how they match, and will justice be served? And will we ever get out of this dark-rooted tyranny, or as Aaron Russo called it, the road to tyranny? Will we ever get off this road? We're going to find out. So I want to bring our very own TJ to the forefront here. TJ, it's so good to see you on a very, very important day in our lives, and I would say even in our generation's lives. But how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and it's nice to be here. So I'm glad I could be with you guys. And yeah,
Yes.
This is a day that I was 21 then, and that's it. Absolutely, you know what it did to the entire world, with absolutely no connections with giant emails and social medias and everything. Pretty much all within a 2-hour time frame, it awoke in the world.
That's true.
We were all
That's
watching
true.
the same thing. We were all watching the same thing.
It is, yeah. I mean, it just replays in my head like a slideshow. But I kind of want to. I want to start. I want to do the prequel to 9/11. I want to start let's start in 1999, going into 2000. What we thought this new millennium would be like, and let's get into the presidential elections. That was the big controversy at the time. The hanging chads, the half chads. Those were the arguments we had back then. And let's kind of paint the picture of what that world was like in the build-up and lead-in to September 11th. So, TJ, why don't you start? Why don't we start with you? You were going into 2000. Kind of tell us where you were and what you were anticipating in this, the year 2000 in this new millennium. And why don't we start with that, TJ?
Sure. I was. I'll just start when I was 19. So this was 1999, and I was. Really just starting to, I had a girlfriend at the time that was soon to be in 2002 would be my wife. So it was growing up and was in a relationship, and I just decided to get right into the world of, trying to work right away, not so much college, but try to work. And what I did is 1999 was able and lucky enough to be just this young guy that was accepted by an owner of a dealership to come in and start helping run sales, start off in sales and then learned leasing. You did a lot of it on a calculator, You had maybe a website or two you went to, but it was much slower then. You had no cell phones, maybe a beeper, and a pager. You had a pager that would get zinged at you at 1 a.m. if somebody was an internet lead coming in.
Yeah.
The most amazing thing, though, that I keep telling everybody is I actually wish it was 1999 again.
Yeah.
But I still had everything that I had, because you were not anxiety ridden by a beep on your phone or an email or checking your phone every 2 seconds. You didn't have the fake vibration on your leg thinking it was your phone. Here's what I did,
Yeah.
Dean. I remember this. I would leave a sticky note in the morning of what I was going to do and when I'd be home. And that is how you did it. You were home when you said you were going to be home, right? I would go out to the golf course. I would be out there for 4, 5, 6 hours. And then you came home, maybe you stopped for dinner, but you come home. And then when you got home, you sat down, you ate, and you talked. You talked. How was your day? You talked. And you listened.
Right.
And it was just an amazing thing, and there was nothing else to do. You knew nothing else. You read a book, you walked, you exercised, you did things, it was just different.
Hard to believe. And, we're at that generation, TJ, in the same regards that 100 years ago, the people going into the 20th century, the last of the 1800s, had to carry that, those traditions, those stories of what life was like. So we have that responsibility. And that's why I think it's so important. But if I can add to that, TJ, is, the big controversy at the time, it was Y2K. Going into Y2K. And I remember people were just buying toilet paper, all the supplies, everyone was freaking out, and nothing happened. And, but that was the big hoopla. And I'll tell you this, prior to Bush getting into office, politics was not a big deal. I mean, it was like MTV, rock the vote, you're Democrat, it doesn't matter. Everyone, had respect for each other. It wasn't so volatile. We weren't part of any wars of significance that we knew of. There was no draft. And, we were looking forward to the year 2000. And TJ, I remember watching a documentary about a doctor who invented a time machine through a DeLorean. And in this year 2000, we would have flying cars and, Michael Jackson and Max Hendron would be on TVs, all these digital characters and everything, and skateboards would fly. And by the way, it's 2021, and I still have yet to see that come true. But so that's what we were expecting. And I remember to myself, TJ, and I don't know about you, but I was like, I can't believe we're living in the year 2000. This is so weird. We've always had a 19 next to the number. It was so futuristic. That's kind of worn off, but that was kind of what it was like. Now, fast forwarding a little bit, going into 2001, we had a presidential election November of 2000. And, looking back at it now, TJ, it was really a choice of no choice at all. You look at Al Gore, man, bear, pig, and then you look at Bush Jr. and all this. It was like, we've never seen a son of a president run before. So this was kind of new. And that's where I noticed, and please chime in, is I noticed for the first time there was a real divide in the country that was beginning a fissure, a rift that never ended. And really started there with the 2000 election. You recall that, TJ?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually remembered it being one of the only rifts that wasn't related to race or some kind of gun violence type, Rodney King type incident where it was meant to divide the country. This was the first time I remembered in my lifetime where it was a division of, Democrat, Republican, or who's right in the Supreme Court, who's not, equal protection in an election, hanging chads, all down to Florida, again, a swing state. It was everywhere, and it was funny because it was one of the only elections that I remember, and there was just a few of them, but where you went to bed and you were told someone won, and then they wake up in the morning, the papers say this, and then find out that that's not the case. And then, it comes down to this. But yeah, there's huge division in the country at that time, for sure.
Yeah, there was definitely a huge division, and it became a sporting event, really. It became a sporting event. We were basing our support for a president back then, kids, of which personality we like the best, or who could play the saxophone, or who had the best smile, or who was young enough to we can relate to in a sense. Policy was maybe third or fourth at that point, so there
Yeah,
was a
we had
real
a
emphasis.
we had
Otherwise,
free pay-per-view basically on
yeah.
one of five channels that we watched. It seemed like,
Yeah, exactly. And all that stuff. And at the same time, just to tell you about the pop culture in America in the build up to, this dreadful day is it really became very lowbrow, if I recall. I mean, you saw the rise of the starlets that were all like, 15 years old. Which we've never seen before, the Britney Spears and so forth, the boy bands, emphasis boy bands. So you saw that culture, which we now know what it is, start to flare. And then you had the hanging chads, which now you look back 20 years later, that hanging chad moment, TJ, from the 2000 election was the probably the smoking gun to bring in the digital voting machines from 2000, if you can believe
yeah,
it. And
yeah,
and certainly when that election was over and they handed it to Bush, it was given to him by the Florida Supreme Court, if my memory stands correct. So all these things that people are saying, the Donald Trump, not my president, and all that, that really started with the Bush era, the not my president and all that, the most heinous things ever. So now we're going into 2001, the first term of the new administration. And why don't you tell us, going into 2001, where was your head, TJ? Were you aware of the political apparatus? Were you getting astute to it all, or were you concentrating on your own, your own life, like many of us?
no, definitely concentrating on my own life. When you're young, that's what you do. But the difference was I was in finance, so I was actually watching the market. And if you go back, this was actually, we were entering into a recession at the time. Economy, I believe, unemployment rate at the time had jumped up to like 4.4%, which was crazy to people. You had the big tech, all of the internet stocks were going down. It's a funny thing is that NASDAQ hit a low, lost all of its value is just a fast forwarding thing. It didn't actually ever regain where it was after that crash until 2015. So 14 years later. So there was a lot of, call it reset type stuff going on, it felt like. And of course, then you had a lot of different things that were happening around the world with Iraq at the time.
Yeah.
There was, I'm trying to think, I can't put my head on it, but there was something that happened in Iraq with.
It was a wag the dog moment, if I
Yeah,
recall. America was just reeling off the Monica Lewinsky miniseries, which really introduced some salacious, dirty sex details into every American's home, every family's home.
it
And that
made it
was so
okay.
embarrassing.
It
If you
made it
recall,
okay to
remember
talk
the Star
about.
Report. Yeah, the Star Report.
Yeah.
So that was the build. So, we're going through 2000 now. 2001 comes, and the country's now divided because they feel that this George W. Bush, he was handed everything that was given to him from his father, former President George Herbert Walker, former head of the CIA, which we kind of, one ear out the other back then. Now we're looking at it now like, what is wrong with us? Why didn't we see that? So there's all this controversy going into 2001. Now we notice he's bringing in Dick Cheney, Mr. Penguin himself, and Donald Rumsfeld, and a lot of leftovers from the neocon 1980s are now in the White House, and everything seemed fine. Everything seemed fine. I mean, there was nothing to take notice of. Now, me personally, I was for this occasion. I was of age. I was older. Contrary to popular belief, but for this argument here, I was going into college, TJ. I was going into college. I was an adult. I was careless. I was driving without my seatbelt. I don't think that was a law yet. So I was living on the edge. And now here comes September 11th. And the weirdest thing happened is, if you recall, TJ, in the news, weeks before 9/11, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a week, there was a story of a golfer named Stuart Payne. I believe that was his name, who was in a Payne Stewart. Yes, thank you. Yeah, that he was in an airplane and he hit a building, he crashed. Okay, and then in the same realm, there was the TWA flight that I think it went into the water and all kinds of stuff. So the airplanes were, mechanical failures. All right, we've never known anything else. So September 11th comes. Now let's transition to that, TJ. So tell me how you found out, and tell me, walk us through that day, and we'll start dissecting it.
Well, it's actually kind of funny. Leading up to, I want to say it was just a couple weeks before 9/11, it was in the news that the leader of the Taliban at the time was assassinated. And he was assassinated. I think they were going to do a press interview and he was assassinated. And that was in the news, and they made a big deal about it because they were talking about that meant some kind of a indication of war of some sort. And all I know is I remember seeing that because I was like, whoa, that's, you see the word like assassination and you are like, whoa, And I remember waking up that morning. It was Tuesday. I'm driving through a neighborhood going slow, and I get pulled over because I ran a stop sign because I was listening on the news on Steve and Sabrina, 104.5. I remember it. And I heard that planes smashed into the building, and they were freaking out like, oh my gosh, and I'm thinking to myself, what? And then the officer rolls up to me, and I said, I'm sorry, I'm listening to this, and it's blowing, and he goes, what? So I turn it up, and he's like, all right, just go slow, just let me go, like, whoa, what the heck? And he knew even by that radio that something was going on. And then I drove into work, and you've got a television out by the sales floor, then you had one back in the waiting room. And I came in, I said, you guys, can you see what's going on? And everybody goes, what are you talking about? Nobody had a clue. No one had a clue. And so we got the TVs on, the TVs out in the waiting room, and basically you watch the entire thing unfold, and you just cannot believe what you're seeing. And I mean, the feeling that you have is like absolute terror, because even though New York is far away, it feels like it's in your backyard when you have this going around, because nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows what's going on.
Nobody knew. And if you recall that day too, TJ, is I was supposed to go to class, and it was the math class. So I was on a selfish level, because I didn't know the extent of everything. Class was canceled. So I was like so relieved. I was like, oh, good. I don't have to go today, because I hated school. So I went back, and then like everyone else, because, I woke up to this on the TV and then went to school. There was no class. I came back. It was still on. And we didn't know what it was. Then we started slowly figuring out, according to the news, that it was a terrorist attack. And what do you know? They had this goat herder looking fella named Osama bin Laden just plastered on the television 24/7 in these videos where he's like teaching and stuff, all this weird, really creepy stuff. I mean, if you've never seen those type of people before, it is a very scary look. And we
what
thought,
got me is it was so
go
fast.
Ahead, go.
It was on the news the same day. Now, how did they know that so fast? Is what blew my mind. And I remember then saying, well, they've got who did it already, and they name us. And what did everybody say? Who's that? We've never heard of these people, And obviously there was an attack in 93 on the World Trade Center, but nobody really knew what the whole thing meant. No one knew. What's terror in the United States, right?
Yeah. It's like getting dumped and not even expecting it. Then we thought, being over in California at the time, like I was in the LA, we thought there was going to be another attack, somewhere on the West Coast, because we saw that, the 3 or 4 on the East Coast. So you had the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and then Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, excuse me. So we thought that something was going to happen on the West Coast. So all the planes were down. But I'll tell you this, if you can recall the patriotism, I've never seen anything like it. Everyone had a flag up. If you didn't have a flag on your house, something's wrong with you. So all the flags sold out at the grocery store. In fact, my mother stole mine. She didn't want to buy her own, so she stole my flag. And just to show you how popular it was, I mean, people were stealing flags. I mean, think about that today. And I remember people honking and waving at cops and firefighters, like, you're our hero. And unfortunately, there was some violence towards, Indians that were Sikhs, had nothing to do with this. There was some, retaliation on them, and that was wrong. And it was terrible to hear. But we were still dumbfounded. Now, TJ, I wish I had that discernment that you had back then, because I bought into everything they sold us. So, I can relate to people today a little bit, because I was hook, line, and sinker. So let's talk about that. So now the information's coming out that, 19 hijackers or whatever with box cutters, they found the magical passport on the rubble, and they already knew who the boogeyman was. Were you buying into it all, or 80%, or where were you at that point? Because you're a little older than me, so maybe you had that discernment that I wish I had.
No, at the time, I think for the next month, you were basically, it was the best marketing job ever, because if ever you wanted to go to war in Afghanistan for 20 years and do whatever you want to do over there, you were selling it to the American people so much that, I would say 95% of the people were on board, and, they knew nothing other than they wanted revenge. So they sold Americans to be so angry to get revenge, and at the time, I didn't understand why it was being pushed so hard to go to a gigantic country when you just showed all, 12 whatever people on terrorists that are flying these planes. You just showed all their pictures. They're all dead, and you're going to get this one guy. Why it takes an entire army, and I didn't understand the push, why it was, and the president was pushing it, and the Congress was pushing it. Yes, there were some against it, but it was a push by the media, and it was unreal, because I think that was the first time in my life that it was all about war. And we invaded Afghanistan, by October 7th? So we were there a month later.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredible if you think about it. I mean, like 2 generations have been born since we've been in this war. And I would even equate it to this, TJ, is that Americans at that time have not really seen a war since Vietnam. So you're talking about 30 years of no significant huge wars to our knowledge. So in some sense, this country was like, yes, we've never experienced it in this generation. Somebody, attacked us. Somebody killed our friends, our brothers. Let's go over there and kick some ass. We don't care who it is. Right. And everyone was pointing at Saddam Hussein a little bit. I remember that was like, public enemy number 1. And then, this Osama guy. But so now Bush's approval ratings are in the 90s. So whatever fracture there was of him getting into office, I mean, he was literally, like, I don't think we've seen a popularity percentage that high in a long time. I don't think we've seen it since. And now, where were you in your support for Bush in that doctrine at that time? Were you staunchly against it? Were you kind of like, let's look into this now? Or where was TJ at that moment?
No, I was strongly against Bush. Absolutely strongly against. And it's only because I didn't like his father. I didn't like anything to have to do, because remember, with the Iraq War, I mean, we went, when I was a teenager, 12 or 13, we went to, and I was at 91, 92, we went into Iraq. And all for nothing again. It's, why is it always over there? China's the one that eats our lunch. Why is it always over there? What's over there that they need other than oil? And it's like, I was sick of it. And when I, some of my friends I knew were going to be going over there, my age, I'm thinking to myself, for what? Right. I mean, it's get a group of high elite people, go over there, find him and get him, use intelligence, go grab the guy, bring him back, let's try him, you know.
Yeah.
But I was strongly against it, and I actually started turning the TV off even back then, and I couldn't watch it anymore. It was just nonstop. Everything was war. Everything was war. And then once
Yeah.
it started, it was, there's been 3 deaths. There's been 15 deaths. There's been this whole, and they were always telling you all the bad news. They were never telling you how many people that were terrorists were being killed in numbers. They were telling you how many Americans were being lost.
That's right. That's right. From IEDs. So now going into that, so now, you know, there's the war. There's the ad nauseum ground zero on television. And there is the mourning, the death. Every TV program, every movie, every pop culture aficionado, everything was, you know, the 9/11 propaganda, I guess we could say, the mind control. You know, oh, the Patriot Act's coming. Good, pass it. Yes, pass it. And,
Yes.
you know, firefighters, yes. In the military recruits too. And maybe you could talk about your sister, Kristen Megan, and her decision to get into the military, you know, kind of tied to this. Maybe you can shed some light on that, because a lot of people, TJ, were just signing up to be in the military to go kick some ass. So maybe you can share some thoughts on that, TJ.
Well, first off, yeah, the Patriot Act, and not just that, but this is when, if you've heard about it, the Hammer scorecard was basically implemented with the NSA, which was recording everything, every voice, every digital, everything was being recorded. This is when it started, and it was basically known as a secret plan, and that's what all started it. Was they were not recording terrorists, they're recording every single American. And that's when it all started in this Patriot Act. And it was, you know, even then, I believe you even started getting some talks and pads of when you're going through the airports, going to theme parks, they were going to start using like fingerprinting. This is where the whole idea started. Like, you're going to use your thumbprint to get in. Well, that's how they keep your data. You know, all these things were happening where no longer did you go down the road, do a ding dong, you know, do a knock on someone's door and run away and have fun. You did that, now you probably get, you know, electrocuted, ring bell looked at, Big Brother, and
Exactly.
you know,
That's why I don't do it anymore. Yeah.
I mean, there's no more toilet papering anything anymore because there's cameras and
Right.
people, things everywhere. They immediately, when that happened, that day is when we of what freedoms we had left were being absolutely smashed for the next 20 years, and it leads basically to today. But just to say what you said, all of the attention, all of the effort, all of the money, all of the troops, everything, all the whatever needed to be done, the tanks, the military power, should have been used on the survivors' families, should have been used to rebuild the police force and the fight. And it wasn't just New York. Remember, many police and firefighters from across the country went there and were in that rubble for a long time and got very sick from, and it burned for days underneath, you know? And
And I want to get into that, TJ. I really want to get into the anomalies of it all. I have an incredible story I have to share with people. But TJ, I'm going to stand by, because we have one of our associate producers, Jessie, who's actually in New York right now. And she's actually, she was there in New York when this happened. She has a very different perspective than us who were not in New York City. And maybe she could shed some light, but stand by, TJ. We're going to bring you back, and then we're going to get into it on the other side. So stand by there. It's just incredible when you think about this time, because, you know, we've been so consumed with everything happening right now. And you know, I'm guilty of that. And, you know, by default, that we forget how we got here. And so what we're doing, we're tracing back the good, the bad, the oblivious, the ignorance to where we are today. So I'm going to bring Jessie to the show here. She's a friend of the show, part-time associate producer over there in New York City, and is literally standing through this mess now, through thick and thin. But we'll get into that later. Jessie, I'm going to bring you to the show here on this anniversary of 9/11. Thank you for calling in tonight. How are you doing on this evening here? Okay, we have to check her mic. She has to unmute herself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes. So, Jessie, you're in New York City now. Before we get into the era gone by, can you kind of describe what New York's doing now? Are they having a memorial? Are they still not allowing some of the firefighters to come in who are sick? Give us some insight on that, if you could.
Dean, I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure what's going on as far as all that is. I will tell you that this is a difficult anniversary for me. It's been 20 years. It was really difficult when it happened. And looking back over the course of 20 years, it's been a roller coaster. And what happened with Afghanistan, we don't need to get into all that because we know that that's a whole thing. Between that and the authoritarian role that our government has decided to take in the last week or so, it's a hard anniversary. It's difficult.
It is. It's a doubling down. But let's talk about New York. Because you're originally from New York. You're from upper state New York.
Yep.
A lot of people think that New York is just New York City, just like, California is LA and Frisco. And I'm like, no, it's not. So maybe just real quick, if you could, can you kind of shed some light on what New York City was like? What was that mood? What was that atmosphere before 9/11? I mean,
before 9/11, it was just everybody was so much more trusting. There was so much more we really felt more connected. Everything was more like there was no I would say between pre 9/11 and post 9/11 there was a element of paranoia that happens following 9/11 2001.
Trauma, very, very trauma.
And the trauma caused a level of distrust. And originally it kind of manifested itself as like, okay, we're all Americans. We all, we're in this together, which was beautiful. And there was, I remember there were flags everywhere after 9/11. It was, and we all had that all over the country.
We did. Yeah. I remember, I remember being in college and I drew a cartoon of Osama bin Laden like getting hung in something ridiculous like that, and people were like applauding. So there was some unity, before the Iraq War, which that's a whole different topic. But if you could, and only if you can stomach it, can you maybe describe that day of 9/11 and where you were and what New York City or New York was like in general? Because I can't even imagine the mayhem.
So what happened that day, Dean, I was in 8th grade. I actually stayed home from school that day. My mom was working in she worked at a Job Corps, which is something you guys around the country probably don't know what that is, but it's like a college. It's kind of like it's a thing. Everything was locked down. Nobody could leave. Nobody could leave their buildings. It was pretty scary. And my mother told me to turn the TV off and wait for her to get home. And I didn't know what she was talking about. And it was a pretty intense day. She could not leave her job. She was stuck there. Everything was just shut down. Nobody knew what was going on. There was just panic. It was absolute pandemonium. And
pandemonium.
I was alone. It was me and my brother. I was 12. My brother was 15. We were just at our house, and my mom was stuck at her job. She couldn't leave. And pretty much every building, our high school, our middle school, everything was locked down. I was home from school that day.
Right. And I can't, I hear the stories about how the teachers told the students that day. And it was just out of everyone's, lexicon to describe what has happened. Nobody could believe. They're like, okay, people hate us.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until much later.
It didn't compute. It was just
it didn't compute.
It was a whole.
We were having too much of a good time, Jessie. Yeah. We were such a decadent country, very consumed with Super Bowl and everything else in pop culture. But Jessie, it's up to you. But do you want to talk about a special friend you had, or a mutual friend? Do you want to bring that up, or at all? I mean, that's up to you, because there's a significant part in I believe history where that particular person in what they did really changed the narrative to this.
I guess I can touch on this in a certain way, Dean, and that's all I can do. But
okay.
I did at 18 years old. So this happened when I was this day 2001 happened when I was very young. I was probably, I'm trying to think. I was in 8th grade, so I was probably like 13 when this happened. I didn't understand the politics behind it. I did not understand all of the shadiness behind it. When I was 18, I saw the movie Loose Change, and it's funny because later on I would end up dating the guy that made that movie. And I guess that's really all I have to say.
Well,
I see everything, though. It really did.
So if people are unfamiliar with it, or maybe they're like, "Oh, I remember that," she's talking about Dylan Avery, who made a film called 9/11 Loose Change, which really changed the entire narrative about 5 years into it.
If it wasn't for, I will say, if it wasn't for that movie, I wouldn't be the way that I am right now.
Yeah.
Where I can say, okay, I don't trust the government because they're shady. There's so much that doesn't make sense. There's so much that there's so much that comes to us through the media that is just, it's filtered, I guess is the way that you can put it. It's not, we don't properly.
It's pre-chewed, pre-owned.
Yeah.
Jessie, if you would like, stick around for a roundtable towards the later segments if you can, but any maybe closing thoughts on this day as a New Yorker, because New Yorkers are very prideful. Go ahead.
What's really important to me, Dean, is that the day after 9/11, the American flag was a symbol of strength. It was a symbol of power. It was a symbol of hope. It was a symbol of unity. And now, for whatever reason, 20 years after all of this happened, the American flag, for some reason, is not to us, not to people that are aware and tuned in, but to half the country who follow the mainstream media. The American flag has become a symbol of white supremacy and racism and hatred. And I don't understand how they could weaponize something that is so important and such a key to what makes us us. And that it's just, it's disgusting, and it really bothers me. And that's why this anniversary is so upsetting. It's because when I reflect on where we are and where we came from, how after like what happens, why now, 20 years later, are we offended and afraid of what's supposed to make us, like, what makes us great and what makes us wonderful?
It's a very big question, and it deserves a big answer. And maybe we can answer that this evening on this episode. So, Jessie, you are invited to stand by if you can. But thank you for coming up here and sharing your perspective over there in New York. And I just want everyone to see that, hey, New Yorkers, not all of them are insane like, the people running that place. There are people in New York, especially upper state, that are just, they bleed red, white, and blue, and they deserve their fair share of perspective. They're fighting too, really hard. So, Jessie, keep up the good fight, and maybe we'll see you in a little bit. Okay, thank you. Okay, so, everyone handles it differently. I'm going to bring TJ back. And it's so good to see Jessie again. You've probably seen some of her music videos on her Saturday night showcase. And so it's good to see her. TJ, welcome back. Now let's get into the minutia of this 9/11 thing, this event, okay? Because I'm going to admit right on national television here, or, the new form of it, TJ, that hook, line, and sinker, I was bought and sold. All the propaganda, supported the George W. Bush. I was an adult just now getting into politics, and at that time, TJ, the emergence of a Fox News came to play, and the 24-hour news cycle was born with the ticker and news story every hour. We're so grateful for it. I mean, my sleepless nights are thanking the news gods, TJ, like tonight. But you had the Fox News. Now, someone like me, I didn't know any better. We have to forgive ourselves. I didn't know TJ's back then, or Lisa's, or any of these people. We thought, and a good portion of us thought, it was the fair and balanced. It was the alternative. It was edgy, and the Bill O'Reillys were coming about. And we looked at people through the lens of the Fox News characters that questioned 9/11 and all the holes in it. I mean, my God, there's a lot of holes in the story. Nothing makes sense. They were called, TJ, domestic terrorists. How dare you question, and all the people died. So there's the emotional argument, if you recall, TJ. I mean, if you call for a fair investigation, or maybe we should look at this a little, you were just buffooned, you were ostracized, you were beaten up by the bikers for Bush and all these types. We see the parallels today, which we'll get to, but when did this start unraveling? It didn't make sense. And I want to say this started for a lot of people when the Iraq war came about now, and the whispers of it, and you had Hillary Clinton voting for it, you had the real Joe Biden voting for it, just across the board. I think the only ones that didn't was like Ron Paul and Kucinich or something like that on the Democrats. But you want to talk about that a little bit, and then how the military now and the wars are building up, and the support for the president, the administration, and the 9/11 narrative is starting to collapse into its own footprint, if you could. Let's talk about that, TJ.
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes to the whole thing of the media propaganda to sell whatever it is that whoever's running this government is trying to, their goals. I mean, it's very sad. And what happens is when you are a independent media, or you're somebody that wants to speak out, and everything you're hearing doesn't make sense and nobody will listen to you, that's what creates the different type of media and these type of platforms, because people saw exactly what was happening. Why do they keep going to war in the same place? Why was there a, Iran war, Russia war? Why? And why do they keep giving weapons to people that you shouldn't be giving weapons to, and then they use them against you? And it's like, it's this nonstop, never-ending war, and it just has to do with overthrowing regimes through the words of war, and putting people in that can control the flow of whatever needs to flow through there, whether it's drugs, people, weapons, oil, minerals, the things that are worth billions and trillions of dollars. And who gets the contracts? It's always somebody that has something to do with family, or somebody in the government wins the contract.
Exactly.
And every single time, whatever they buy, whatever they get is 30 to 40% more than it should be. And, just to kind of piggyback over these narratives in investigations, they did an investigation on the fleecing of the Afghanistan war and the money spent. And when they looked at $160 billion that was used, they really got into about $70 billion of it they figured was fraud, waste, or just ineptness. And it's just nonstop. So then where does all that money really go? So when you go to Congress for war powers and to get more money for war, where's that money really going?
Where does it go? Where did the trillions of dollars from the Pentagon go that went missing the day prior? Where did the owner of the Twin Tower Plaza, I think his name Feinstein. I mean, I used to know this like my alphabets. I mean, 9/11, I knew it, but you can only know so much. You start drifting away with everything going on now. But where are all these people?
Silverstein.
Silverstein. How come nobody got fired, TJ? Nobody was fired from the administration for knowing an attack on August 6th and a memo to Condoleezza Rice that, hey, they're going to come here. George Tenet, the head of the CIA, was allowed to stay. Why was NORAD, the air defense of the United States, NORAD, why was Dick Cheney in control of NORAD, first time ever, the vice president, during 9/11, and simultaneously, they were doing drills of the same kind of event when this happened?
Yeah.
Why is this? And you know how much they spent on it, everybody? $3 million of an investigation, and they spent a lot of more money investigating Monica Lewinsky with Bill Clinton. So where was the justice that was being served past the emotional wall of how could you? And to this day, I still get that. To this day, I still get people, proud conservatives, bless them, but, they're saying, how could you question? You think that would really happen? And I'm thinking, well, have you looked into it? You mean to tell me, TJ, that a passport from one of the hijackers who just was allowed in here, that they just found it in all the rubble in the Twin Tower plazas, the World Trade Center? They found the magical passports that survived everything. We're led to believe that, like children. And then we're led to believe that this Osama bin Laden character, who is, let's call him what he is, Tim Osman, his CIA name, he was helped fighting the Mujahideen over there in Afghanistan with the CIA. And he's never even on the America's Most Wanted list for the FBI out of the entire time. And then years later, we just buried him at sea and did a little prayer for him and just, broke a champagne bottle on and just said, have at it. Good luck, dead man. It makes no sense whatsoever. And so here's what I'm saying, TJ, is 9/11 is the key to waking up to this matrix. And I'm telling you, and I say that from experience because it did me. It did me. And when I found out, TJ, the truth about 9/11, when I actually looked into it and I got past the wall, the filters of cable news and this conglomerate evil media, and I looked for myself, and I found something, and I saw a film called The Obama Deception years later, after I supported a lot of hell, unbeknownst to myself. I said, how could I have done that and not seen it? What was clearly right in front of us. You see the parallels here today, folks? You see the parallels? So that's what I'm saying. It's discovery on your own terms, and that awakening, once you're awakened, TJ, you don't go back to sleep. Just like you were never asleep, your sister joined the Air Force and found out, after the 9/11 drug wore off, she found out, like a lot of us, that we were lied to. We were lied to. And all the people in our generation, TJ, going to the Iraq war because of this, getting their legs blown off, getting PTSD, coming home, committing suicide because they're not allowed to get medical marijuana. So they have to get the drugs, the SSRI drugs, and they're committing suicide. All these veterans now from these wars that were not that long ago, they're in pain, just like the 9/11 responders. So TJ, here's my question, and then we're going to hit a hard break. But were you a 9/11 truther, or were you discovering things that would classify you as a 9/11 truther, the most demonized domestic terrorist at that time, would you say, or were you just kind of quiet about it and you had your own discernment? What say you, TJ?
I was more quiet about it, trying to find things out, because I knew when you watch something, and let me just put this in perspective. Now, when we look back at this, what was our FBI doing during that time? What was their big case? Do you know what it was prior to 2001? Do you know what the big case was? The big case was the monopoly fraud at McDonald's. The monopoly fraud at McDonald's was what the FBI was doing sting operations for, going around to the winners, trying to find out where did they get their pieces from and having them do all the stuff. Well, it made it to a judge and they're about ready to make a big decision on what they're going to do. And then 9/11 hits.
Right.
That's what they were doing.
Interesting.
So then you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, aren't they supposed to keep, do these type of things? Well, now we know the CIA knew that these people were here, that they were here, but they didn't let the FBI know fast enough. Well, you know what? If the FBI knew fast enough, they were doing the Monopoly game piece fraud. So
well, also, TJ, we have to remember too, because of what you just said, this was the creation of the Department of Homeland Security for that very reason, what you just said. Interesting. Correct. It just refreshed my memory about what you said. Bingo. Because of the, nobody's cooperating. They're chasing the monopoly man and not the boogeyman that we created called Osama bin Laden. They created DHS. Now, let's talk about that for a minute, because DHS, as far as I'm concerned, it's unconstitutional. It is very World War II Germany-like Homeland Security. It seems that they already had it planned out to release and announce DHS. It was already ready to go before this event. And there's a DHS within a DHS. It's just more bureaucracy. And it's in their best interest, like the FBI, to make sure there's always a terror threat. Now, TJ, I want to get into the parallels of what we've talked about tonight. And I hope people, maybe we'll take a call later, but I hope you try to remember what that life was like, what we, that joy we had for the country and for our neighbors back then, and try to remember these simple leisures of life. None of this minutiae that we're dealing with today. So TJ, we're going to hit a hard break. Now, when we come back, stand by, TJ. Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk to Lisa and Jamie's Life Matters and get a foreign perspective on what 9/11 was for them at the time and what it means to them now. Because certainly, if you were American, like I went to Greece just a year or two later, and people found out you're American, they were like congratulating you and all this stuff. And then, right before the Iraq War got really ugly. So there was a unity around the world that we somehow lost. And I'm trying to rediscover, try to remember it tonight. So, it's very memory lane here. So anyways, we're going to take a break. We're going to rejuice our systems here. We're going to come back with a very skillful report, very endearing report from Andi G. And then we're going to bring on Jamie and Lisa and get their perspective. And then we're going to have a roundtable. And TJ is going to tell us some things going on today with the apparatus that we're living in this pandemic war, which is 9/11 every single day. Think about that. Think about the mind control going on now. So we're going to get into that and get some of his intel that he's going to relinquish here tonight. And we'll bring Jessie back as well. And then I'll close it off with a very incredible story about 9/11 that you do not want to miss, that I don't think I've told on air before, and it will blow your mind. So thank you for joining this Real Deal Media special here on the 20 years later of 9/11. It's just, I can't believe it. Time flies. So stand by. We'll see you after this break, and it's going to get hot. See you on the other side.
The establishment is ready to throw the internet kill switch, shut down the cell phone tower, shut down telecommunications, lockdowns, highway checkpoints, all these things. You've got a website now.
It's realdealphone.com. And hold on, Mike. Okay. Elon Musk is calling me again. Is that you? Oh yeah, he's at the space station. He's ordering. We're doing a dinner later.
I got Elon on my line, actually. He's calling me right now. And he's asking for more land in Texas. We both have satellite phones, but the point to get across to people is that everybody in the Liberty community is getting these phones now because it's a backup when the cell towers go down. If they take down the cell towers on purpose as part of this blackout.
When the blackout happens, there's not going to be warning. 5 minutes from now, we're going to black out, so please save your word.
Which, by the way, I think could happen after the Maricopa County audit results. I think they're going to do a total blackout of the internet, media blackout, cell phone blackout.
They don't mind losing popularity, but they hate losing the narrative. The narrative and the control of it is everything to these people. It is their lifeline. You always find China as the wizard behind the curtain here with this.
This is how you can still make phone calls. You can dial other people's cell phones, landlines, or other people's sat phones.
They know how important the real deal phone is. Yeah, we have to be talking because you want to be in the know. You want to know what's going to happen because if there's NATO troops or 178,000 prisoners that were let loose in California by the alleged governor, Newsom.
But they're going after journalists, which means that people like you and I and people who work for Real Deal Media, they need to be able to report, call in information without being geolocated by their cell phones. Well, sat phones are the way to do that. When you point this antenna at the satellites, they don't know where you are.
You're going to want to know where to go, and you're going to have to use alternative matters to do so, and that's why people like Mike and myself, we want to get this word out. Okay, welcome back to the Real Deal Media special here, 9/11, 20 years later, the 20th anniversary tonight. It's really a very touching night, too. I really feel a whole new set of closeness with everybody. Does everyone feel that? And I mean that sincerely. I mean that sincerely because I'm really opening up a little bit here about the past and the flaws and the ignorance in my own journey, in my own story. I'm not proud of it, but if we don't acknowledge, how we got here, then we're doomed to repeat it. So hopefully there's some lonely soul or some soul who's on the fence in this current status, who's maybe thinking, you know what? I'm seeing history repeat itself in 10-year cycles here. This Dean Ryan guy, he's onto something. So we're going to show an Andi G quick report here, and I think Lisa, our producer here, Lisa Duthie, has it queued up. Lisa, go ahead and feel free to fire it. And Andi G, who couldn't be here tonight, check this out here.
Right. Hey, thanks Real Deal for having me on to talk about this day of 9/11. It's a dark day. It's a very dark day. It's the darkest day of American history, most certainly of my life. And it's one of those days that continually gets darker and darker the more that you learn about it. And it's been a ride learning about 9/11 and going from day one and ground zero to 20 years later, here we are, knowing what we know now. What a ride. What a ride. I remember that morning of 9/11. My mom came and woke me up, and we live on the West Coast and it happened on the East Coast, so it was earlier in the morning, and my mom came and woke me up and said, hey, you really need to watch TV. America's under attack. And I didn't have any idea what that meant, but I groggily pulled out and went to the television and watched it with my mom. And the first plane had already hit. We were just watching the aftermath of that, and the announcers talk about that. And I remember very clearly seeing the second plane hit into the tower as we were watching the television, and my mom gasping and crying and just saying, this doesn't happen in America. This doesn't happen on American soil. We are under attack. And I just remember watching, it wasn't comprehending to me. It looked fake. It looked unreal. And I couldn't comprehend the magnitude in that moment of what exactly was happening. I can't remember if we went to school that day or she went to work that day or if we took that day off, but I remember going to school immediately afterwards, whether it was that day or the next day, I don't really remember. But I remember very vividly the somberness of everybody around me. And I was in high school, I was a junior in high school, and I remember we had a marine layer over our school. It was very cold, very damp, very, very chilly and creepy atmosphere to add to the already creepy mounting tension that was there. And I did really appreciate how the country came together. That really did make me feel good as an American then, even as a young American at that moment. And I remember being so just outraged that somebody would attack us under these premises, that so many people would die. And I remember just being outraged by that and wanting to go to war after that. And many of my friends and schoolmates did go to war after that, and none of them came back the same. I almost signed up, but through a stroke of luck, I didn't sign up for the military. That's another story. But yeah, so 9/11, oh gosh. From going from that mindset and then years later learning about the inside work and just really critically looking at things and understanding that steel frame buildings don't collapse into themselves from a fire, and just seeing building number 7 and just all these layers and layers and layers, and still there's layers going through with that dark day. And I understand why a lot of people don't want to look at the truth of that day, because I understand how painful it is. We lost lives. People lost loved ones. People lost their sons, their daughters. The military aspect of it, we lost some of our greatest warriors, and the ones that we didn't lose came back home injured and mentally having to deal with PTSD and just things that we were not expecting. We didn't think we would have to deal with, but we're dealing with, and now we have it. And it changed us. It changed my generation. So that changed us. It changed our whole generation, my age group. I was 16 when the towers hit. If there's anything that I learned through the trauma of that experience and through the further trauma of dealing with military and dealing with friends coming back and just uncovering the truth bit by bit, or what I think might be the truth, who knows what the final truth is at the end of the day. There's so many hands involved with this. But if there's anything to take away, any lessons to be learned from that, is one, how susceptible we are to a narrative when under severe trauma. I mean, you see it today. You see it, there's so many parallels playing out from 9/11 to today. we're all traumatized again by this last year and a half. And you see how people are accepting the narrative. And I get it, because I accepted the narrative too back then. But I learned a lot. And so a lot of us were lucky that we were able to take some red pills. 9/11 was one of the biggest red pills for me. And it led to a whole slew of other endeavors. And I think that is a gift for us. Because I do not believe that ignorance is blindness. Or I do not believe that ignorance is bliss. I believe that ignorance is blindness. And the truth hurts, but the truth is literally the only thing that can set you free. And if we could just apply what we've learned from 9/11 to future false flag events and educate people more on false flag events and what to look for, I mean, could you imagine if the American public had our understanding of false flag events and red flags to look for this last pandemic? I mean, it was luckily that I had taken several red pills and had looked into red flags, that I was able to recognize these lockdowns for what they were. Without 9/11, I don't think I would have done that. Some tips, I think, that might help your normie friends and family members who should come up to speed. Not just because it's interesting or cool, but at this point of the game, it's literally about survival. Learning your landscape, learning these false flags. So to help them understand how corrupt our government truly is, show them documents from, like Operation Northwoods. Get them started on that. Let that sink in. And then show them about the USS Liberty. Okay, these are great trailblazing endeavors to really start conditioning your mind to questioning the government. Help them learn the skills that they need to use to connect the dots. Because 9/11 was one of the greatest deceptions of all time. And we're living through another one right now. And the more people who are able to connect the dots, the more people who cannot allow the BS agendas to continue going forward. I mean, if the American public was awake, 9/11 would have had a totally different take. It would have gone a completely different direction. But we can't go back in the past. We can only go forward. So, help your friends and family. Teach them about false flags so that they can connect the dots for themselves. And then, then you can start showing them things like this piece from the ADL. And then don't even tell them about it. Just let them put the dots together of what's happening here and what's really at stake. Because it's a process, and it's a painful process. We're lucky that we have already gone through the fire, and we understand a lot more than your average normie. But it's our job to light the way for them. So thank you for listening. It sounds weird to say have a good day on 9/11 because it's such a dark day. But God bless and stay true.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Andi G. That was a very thoughtful, fruitful report. And a lot of people were teenagers, a lot of people who were, preteens and what have you. It was really hard to understand. So it's really good to hear that perspective. Before I bring TJ back and we really get into it, I want to get a perspective from that era that was across the pond, England. And, the entire world, they were doing candlelight vigilance, if you recall. Everyone was singing God Bless America, in their countries for us. And it was very endearing, and, for me, that was like, wow, this is really something else. I've never seen anything like it. But I want to bring, actually, let me get that off the screen. Thank you. I'm going to bring Lisa and Jamie Duthie, our producers here at Real Deal Media, to the screen here. Lisa and Jamie, thank you for joining us on this very kind of dark night, but really putting in perspective. But let's get to where you guys were when this all went down 20 years ago, and then we'll catch up to what your thoughts were afterwards. So let's start with Lisa.
Yeah, I was at university at the time. I was 21, but a Tuesday was actually my only day off because I didn't have any lectures that day. So I was at home, and my mum was in hospital, so it was just me and my dad. And I can't even remember what we were watching, but it just completely cut out to go to like the breaking news, and it showed you that like a plane had hit one of the towers. And initially, we thought it was like a little tiny private plane. We didn't know it was like a passenger airline, and we're just completely like, oh my god! We just thought it was like a one-man plane or something.
We all did, Lisa. Lisa, we literally all thought that's what it was. It was an accident or what have you. We've never seen this kind of hell on earth in our modern lifetimes. Jamie, how about yourself? We know Lisa was in university, like many people were. Where was Jamie Duthie in England at this time for 9/11?
Well, where I was a refrigeration engineer, and I was working on site, and we just broke up for lunch, and we crawled into the van after doing some work, put on the radio as normal to listen to some music, and there it was, the breaking news of the 9/11 aeroplane attacks, and we just couldn't believe it because we thought that was not even possible, a plane crashing into New York of all places as well.
Yeah.
Exactly, New York. Now, I'm curious to know, Lisa. I'm curious to know what was kind of the opinion, if you will, or the consensus of the Bush administration up until that point. Were people all tuned in? Were they all for it? Were they against it? Did they not know? What was kind of the UK consensus on American politics at that point?
Well, I was 21. I didn't really care. I thought it was a bit of a dick, to be honest. But I didn't really know what people's political opinions were. Jamie's just like, shut up. I didn't know what people's political opinions were. I wasn't interested in anything like that. I didn't like them. I didn't like any politicians, and I never have. But
and who was the prime minister at that time? I'm trying to refresh my memory. 2001. Was it
2001?
Maggie Thatcher?
No, it wasn't Faggy Thatcher.
Was it Maggie Thatcher?
I think was it Tony Blair?
I'd have to check.
Oh, Tony Blair. Yeah, he would be Blair. Yes, it was Tony Blair.
This is how much attention we paid for politics.
I didn't care. I was 21. I didn't care.
Right, and to be fair, UK at that point in time, you guys had the new Britannia. You guys were celebrating. You were really in depth in your culture, so I could see how politics didn't matter, just like Americans at that time. Now, following 9/11, following all that stuff. Did the UK public in the narrative across the pond start to wane when the Iraq War came, or was it when questions about 9/11 started arising?
Well, I think it was different in the UK because there was a major thing that happened on the day in the UK that didn't happen anywhere else in the world. The BBC announced that Building 7 collapsed while it was behind the woman. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Is she crazy? Like, she must have got it wrong. And then it collapsed. And I was like, there's something going on here. She knew that was going to collapse. So we had that, because she stuffed up, she told us that it was down before, and it was behind her.
I think that was the turning point there, because for a lot of people, because some people obviously question things beforehand, like during the Iraq War, what are all about the weapons of mass destruction and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think when we actually saw the news, even throughout the whole day, people then starting questions. Even people who didn't normally question things were going, "How come this is happening? How come that has happened? Why was he there? Why was they there? How come these people are saying that they heard explosions yet beforehand, and etc." And I think that's the thing.
Here's what's interesting, Jamie. You bring up such a great point, and I noticed it back then. The studious nature and to detail that the Britons, the people of the UK, had when there was a Republican president in office in the United States. I mean, you had the UK public and politics just combing through the American presidents of the conservative nature, not missing a tick on those combs. But then we saw the complete opposite when they had the Obama characters in there. So
it was an emotional roller coaster of the day. First of all, it was like, oh my God, a little plane's crashed in. And then within, was it like 17 minutes, there was another one. And then you knew that was when you knew this was something very wrong here. And then because of what our media done, you were suspicious straight away. You're like, there's something not right here.
Well, in closing, and then we'll have you guys back for the roundtable. I think it's so important the UK role here because it was really 9/11 that really dragged your country into the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War.
Yeah.
You're still
I think
would agree.
many people, I
yeah.
think, yeah.
I think
Can you
like,
maybe shed some light on that, Lisa? Can you shed some light on maybe people that went to war? Was it popular to join the military after 9/11 in England?
a lot of people did actually, yeah, because they were so heartbroken. Regardless, a lot of us had our suspicions that it was something else. I mean, you probably in America didn't want to believe that your government had anything to do with it, but we, like, for the outside looking in, were like, that's not right there.
A couple of my cousins joined the Marines
And
at that time as well.
a lot of people were so heartbroken after watching people jump into their deaths and everything. They wanted to help. They wanted to do their bit because it united the whole world. It actually united the whole world. And over the 20 years after that, you've just watched it slowly falling apart.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Lisa and Jamie, thank you for joining us on this very tough night. Thank you for joining. And we'll have you guys back towards the end of tonight's special. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There you have it. Yeah. So it just, proves what we're saying here. This affected the entire world. I mean, think about it. The Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, it dragged the UK into those wars. I mean, Tony Blair signed, sealed, and delivered the people of England into those wars. And, for the most part, we thought it was the right thing to do. A lot of Americans did. But we're going to bring TJ back here in a minute because we're going to get into the parallels now of we made the case now what life was like, what the psyche of the United States was, what the psyche of England was, and the world for that point, in that matter. And now we're going to go up to current, to modern day, to now. And we're going to talk about, is there going to be justice? Why are we facing literally the same kind of scenarios that we did 20 years ago? They just have a different name on it. They have a medical doctor behind their boogeyman instead of the Bin Laden character. Now it's a Fauci character. The traumas that we had back then. Remember turning on the television and just seeing the ground zero and just you couldn't even bear the emotions. And remember hearing the plane audio of the phone calls. Now we know they're bunk. One of them was like, "Hey mom, this is your son, Steven. You know me, Steven Miller." It's not the name, but I'm saying you listen to those now and they sound as real as a $3 bill. Because we know phones didn't work back then. Anyways, I'm going to bring TJ back and we're going to get into it. TJ, you crashed the party the other night, and I don't think it was a fair platform to really get into some of the stuff you were talking about the other night. So I'm glad you're here with us now on such a significant moment in American history. But let's talk about the parallels, TJ. Let's talk about the elephants in the room here of everything we saw and lived through in our younger years, now coming back all over again in the same manner, with the same wicked hands behind it, the hidden hands. So let's get into, is justice going to be served here? Are we going to turn the clock back from these CIA pirates that have teamed up with China and the globalists in Canada, all over the world to continue to rule us like slaves? Let's get into it, TJ.
Well, one thing I want to just tell you, you asked me, did this change me? Did I have an idea? When something changes you, when you think something's kind of a little nuts and you just want to hold on to something so one day that you're going to show it. This right here is the Grand Rapids Press and here in Michigan. And to see the date. So what that is right there is this. America attacked. Here is the paper. This is what our paper front page showed that day. I kept it because I knew. I've moved 6 times in 20 years and I've kept it. I have 3 kids. I've kept it because I knew. But the same day I bought a magazine because I was reading through it. That's what you did. You went into a gas station, you read through it, and decided if you were going to buy it or not. And I saw something on here. This was actually a week later. The Time magazine article came out and I kept it. The reason I kept it is there was never any pictures of Shanksville, of the plane crashing, and there was never any video of the most
Pentagon.
heavily guarded of the Pentagon.
Right.
And I was reading through this, and I thought to myself, man, it's weird. The Time magazine would have printed this, and I've kept it because it's always bugged me. But I'm just going to show you this the best I can. These are the flights, okay? Mm-hmm. Those are the flights, and those are the flight patterns. You can then see another flight, okay? But do you notice that they're all solid lines? Solid lines. It has a returning path, and it has when it's coming back. So that's the Shanksville. Those ones are for the towers. But then look at this bizarre one right here. Can you see that? I'm going to hold it up here.
Which one?
Hold on a second here.
On it. Okay.
All right. There we go. Sorry.
Give me up.
Do you notice what's weird about this one that hit the Pentagon? What is up with those dashes, and what does it say?
American Airlines
Return
flight path uncertain.
Correct. It doesn't know because they turn off the transponder, right?
Right.
So then you can see that it says that it made a quick turn to it, hits the Pentagon. Well, then I thought to myself, maybe that explains why there's no video. But then when I had the picture on the next page, and I'm sorry to do this to you.
Oh, no, keep going.
I'm trying to figure this out. If you get really close in there, there are cameras all over the top of this thing. You can see them pointing right where it entered. Why are there no videos? Why is there just one from a check-in area from security? That's the only one. Yeah. It's like two frames. So that is where you
confiscated the one at the Marriott Hotel, TJ. The feds literally confiscated any additional video, which I think if that video were to see light of day, we would have seen a missile hit the Pentagon. Exactly.
My point is, the reason you keep these is because one day you're going to have to be able to use them. And they printed this in 2001, a week after it happened, because this was the truth. This was the truth. This was a media that actually told the truth. Can you believe it? They wrote down the truth. And now what happens is you have to ask the question. If they had no return path and they turn off their transponders and there's no video of an airplane actually hitting the Pentagon, why can't you ask questions when there's 90 cameras around there that could have caught that? It's the most secure area. So this is where I'm leading to now. You always find out after. It's always after, because we were nuts if we would have brought that up then. Nuts. But now you can ask these questions because you've uncovered through these years that they give you information, and now they just straight lie to you that you almost laugh and you think, we're not that stupid.
Right.
But if you dare challenge it, every company that's out there, Dean, if you work for a major company, $1 billion company, they're audited every single year. Every year they're audited. And if they are caught with anything and it's fraud, they're in trouble. I mean, they can't hide these things. So, but if you ask the federal government to audit itself or to ask questions about something that happened, you are immediately crazy or conspiracy theorists. Every one of us that questioned the Wuhan and all that, we were nuts, conspiracy theorists. We lost our Facebooks, our Twitters, whatever. I didn't have a Twitter, but I'm just saying in general, you lost it. But guess what? We aren't the conspiracy theorists. The conspiracy was covering it up. So that is where you have to ask these questions. So everything that we're going through right now, the reason you question it is because it feels wrong. And you have the freedom to question it and to ask the questions. And what we're finding, every single thing that we've been told is not correct, don't listen to it, then you're nuts. And one last thing, Dean.
Nuts.
One last thing. When I watched CNN, this goes back a few years, and it was when Hillary Clinton's emails had been, or different declassified things or classified emails that she had out were being released. A guy on CNN, I believe it was the governor's, it was a Cuomo's bro. Mm-hmm. He said, now listen, these are classified documents, so it's important to understand that you can't look at these documents on your computer because these are classified. You could get in trouble. You make sure to let us look at those and we'll tell you what they said. When I heard that, I thought to myself, that's it. They're all in it. They're all in it together to cover up everything, to get the right people, the big dogs in there that they want to crush this country. There's no doubt about it. The reason why they say, and the reason to answer the question about where has it gone, where that day of September 11th and the next month and the next year, people felt like they were the closest they ever been. A stranger wasn't a stranger anymore.
Right.
You know?
Everyone was
I
just
remember,
so happy. Yeah.
I remember going to the gas station, getting 79-cent gas in the morning, driving by the gas station. It was $2. They were already jumping up the prices, you know, but people were at the gas station talking to each other like, oh my gosh, you know? And now that's what they didn't want. That's what they didn't want. They don't want you to talk. They don't. This is why, fast forward to now. Why do they lock us down? Why are they locking down these countries? Because when you stay at home, yeah, you're going to do some things as far as look at the internet or whatever, but you can't talk to people, right? Now with the things that happen with the Zoom and all that stuff, it screwed them up. Because we found a way to get around it and communicate.
Well, it was YouTube, TJ. It was really YouTube what was the big factor here. It really backfired on them, although they used it to trace who's who in the towards the end. But let's not forget, TJ, what Bush said in one of his addresses: "We will not tolerate," and I quote, "dangerous conspiracies about 9/11." I'm paraphrasing now. I'm not quoting, but if you recall that. Same thing. Fast forward today. What are we hearing? We will not tolerate anyone who questions the miracles of life. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, we have been overran. We're being overtaken by a foreign and domestic enemy who I guess we can even question whether they're human now. That's the next domino to fall. But TJ, it just going back to what you said earlier, and it's so poignant. You said that the newsmen were seeing what was right in front of them. And I do recall Peter Jennings, who my grandmother loved. She called him her boyfriend. So we had a lot of Peter Jennings in my house. And Peter Jennings and elk like that, they were saying, well, it looks like a demolition, you know. It looks like a planned implosion like we see at Vegas at the Stardust and stuff. You know, a lot of people were saying that. And I do recall there was one person in particular who said that, was the Mr. New York at the time, and that was Donald Trump. Trump said it looks like a planned implosion, and it's like almost like Trump knew something. He knew something about it. And I'm sure that if you're an insider and that level, because a lot of them did know something. They were told not to fly that day, not to go to the Twin Towers that day. So my question is, are people talking now finally? Is there going to be a plan of action to take this cabal who has taken control of America and our foreign cousins overseas? Is there a plan to kick these people out of our atmosphere and put them 6 feet under? TJ.
That's I think why we're all feeling the pain we're feeling right now is because that is what is happening. There is absolutely a war going on behind to defund the cabal, to strangle the cabal, and not allow them to have any more of these. And what's funding them is these gigantic stimulus bills, or these bills that they pass for infrastructure. They're going to take that money and they spread it out, and when it doesn't cover even infrastructure. So that's why they're doing it and pushing through all these things so fast. They're running out of money. The people, the main arteries that are around. The reason I don't think you're seeing, and why it looks so stupid on TV, why you see Biden come out and just push these things so hard and so hard and so hard, and they push him out there, and he always says, well, I'm not supposed to say that because I'm going to get in trouble. I have to stop talking now. You know, it's them telling him, you go out and say this, but you need to make this happen super fast right now, because we're about ready to get some big news coming out. And when that hits, they're going to go crazy. I mean, they're going to go crazy. And we've said this before, I really feel like there's going to be more pain for the next 6 months until, it's all done, whether it's going to be the market crashing, if it's going to be more shutdowns, if it's going to be because we need to do it, stop all driving to stop global warming as the next climate disaster, whatever it is, they're going to try to do something, or it could even be attacks to our food, our beef, our chicken, all of those things that they could do. So I just think that they are holding on for their last breath. All signs point to, even when you just turn on the news, I said this the other night, when you turn on and you see France, England, Australia, United States, you see all the countries, and you see, as it Denmark, that just said there is no more COVID. We're raising all restrictions. We don't even consider it a disease anymore. I mean, that's huge. And when you see millions of people in the streets fighting their government, getting maced and bear sprayed and beaten with batons, but they're doing it because there is nothing left. There's nothing left. They are going to stand up. They're going to stand up and get their freedoms back.
Yeah. And I want to apologize. There was a tech issue on my mic, so I was muted the whole time. But TJ so eloquently took over. Thank you, TJ. I feel like a complete dunce after a perfect night. I see Lisa in the background, like dancing and doing something with her fingers. Okay, I thought she was dancing. All right. So what I was saying, TJ, which I'll have to rewind now, is. We saw the Peter Jennings. I'm assuming we heard that part, or no? We didn't hear that part?
Yes, we heard that.
Okay. So we heard that part. I don't know how in the F word I got on mute. Okay. But we saw the Donald Trump speaking. And to me, that was the significant day that there was a plan of action, a 20-year plan, because here's, to answer Jessie's question, how did we get to a point where, kids today, hate the flag or hate the country, hate everything about this. They even hate the food, everything about it. How did we get here? And I would say to her and the people who do ask that, if you study the art of war from the Soviet sector of things, they're fighting us in a totally cost-effective way, which is changing our culture through subversion, by infiltration through the education system, infiltration through the media, to flip us inside out where we don't even know who the enemy is. And we think it's, people like TJ and myself, literally. You talk to some people today, they think there is a KKK member literally underneath their car, behind their sofa and everything. And this is what subversion is. This is the fog of war. This is the fog of the art of war. So, is there going to be justice? Because here we are now, my entire adult life, TJ, since the moment I turned an adult, I have seen wars that people 20 years older than me have not had to see. In drama and conflicts they have not had to see. A lot of people are 20 years older than me, people who are in their 60s, 70s, 50s. You had it good. And some of the most peaceful times in the United States history, where people like TJ and myself, we were met with conflict. Then we were asked to deal with it overseas, and some of us have not come home right. So, is justice going to be served? Is the Donald Trump going to? People always ask me, is the Donald Trump coming back? What can I say to that, TJ? What can I say to people right now who are just like in New York and they have no hope right now? No one on their side.
And that's okay. No, I strongly believe, absolutely. And what is it? It's going to be, what is he going to come back to is going to be the question, because, he was in a really good interview on the Gateway Pundit the other night. And the first time I ever heard him say it, and I know he means it. And he said, frankly, I think they're going to decertify this election. And I think you're going to be really happy. I can't really talk anymore about it. Everybody keeps and he keeps bringing up, well, I can't violate campaign finance laws. I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it has more to do with the fact that there may be something going on. I really, really, really advise everyone, if they want to get a little bit more motivated, I guess, about what's going on, and a little bit more knowledge and education about what's going on, I just have to give all the credit to this Patel Patriot on Telegram. He has wrote a devolution series 1 through 10, and does some addendums. They're long and they're interesting to read, but he has gone all the way from 2015 to now, and all the executive orders, all the different things. He explains how Trump hired all of the top commanders in the military, all 10 of them, except for one was hired by something during the Biden administration. When they came in, they actually hired Flynn's brother, to be the one in the Pacific. So these are all people. And remember, how many federal judges did Trump always talk about that he put in? And I think that is where it's going to start to come in. And Arizona audit is going to be coming out. And I'm telling you, it's going to be what it's going to be. And it's just been delayed on purpose for reasons.
Right.
And we're trying, the gaslighting that's going on, the propaganda, them watch it. I'm telling you, if you watch the news, you're killing yourself. Stop it. Just stop it.
Well, yeah,
go
it's
walk
everywhere.
a dog, go do something else. But I'm going to say to you, this all started just like what you said. The reason why there were wars, the reason why there was a crappy stagflation economy, the reason why there was nothing for the people, and the crime in the big cities and the crimes in the Chicagos and everything that was going on was because we had a uniparty cabal system being put in the establishment. It was always the reason you divide is because you need them to vote Democrat and you need them to vote Republican, but they're the same. That's why they do these nice concession speeches at the end.
Sure.
When Trump shocked them and got in, they're done. They're done. That's what he meant by we're going to drain the swamp. We're draining the
Mitch
swamp.
McConnell is like the best friend of Biden right now. They're just walking hand in hand, skipping together, doing jump rope. I mean, my God, TJ. But hey, TJ, let's keep going. I want to bring back our Commonwealthers and maybe take a question or two from the audience. But thank you, Lisa and Jamie, for joining us. But before we do, I want to show this clip, everybody. This is a clip to stick with the 9/11 theme and how it is now paralleling today. This is a clip of George W. Bush, his speech today. And Lisa found this. Thank you, Lisa, who has just really helping me today. So check this out. I don't want to spoil it, but we'll discuss after. But this is Bush saying that 9/11, those attacks from 20 years ago, were just as deadly, if not more, than a certain date. You're going to hear it from the horse's mouth himself. Check this out.
The security measures incorporated into our lives are both sources of comfort and reminders of our vulnerability. And we have seen growing evidence that the dangers to our country can come not only across borders, but from violence that gathers within. There is little cultural overlap between violent extremists abroad and violent extremists at home. But in their disdain for pluralism, in their disregard for human life, in their determination to defile national symbols, they are children of the same foul spirit, and it is our continuing duty to confront them.
Okay, there you heard former President George W. Bush literally stating that 9/11 was just as bad as that January 6th of this year at the Capitol. I'm going to bring in Lisa. Lisa, do you agree to that? I mean, just to be fair, I'll ask, is that something that you agree with from the great scholar known as George W. Bush?
Yeah, children of the same foul spirit. To compare for a second an event where one of the people that was there, apparently the rioters, was shot when they hadn't even entered through a window yet, to an event where all those people died, is absolutely disgusting. Why not compare it to the 13 servicemen that got killed because of Joe Biden? Compare it to that.
And a very, very valid point.
That's the most disrespectful thing I've ever heard in my life. What about Black Lives Matter? What about what they done? And they're still doing. And Antifa. Shame on them.
Shame on him indeed. TJ, I mean, there's a lot of shame going towards Biden, but certainly there's a lot of shame going towards Bush, saying, why did we lose our son in this Afghanistan war or this Iraq war? You had us at 9/11. We followed you down the pits of hell to, for the greater good, just like today, for the greater good, right? They told us we got to do something and put in our arms for the greater good. And a lot of people, you'd be surprised, they don't have a father anymore. They don't have a son, a daughter, because of this 9/11 mind control trauma drug that led us in our countries too, Canada, Australia, England, into the Iraq war. So We want justice. We want to see what Bush supposedly did to Saddam Hussein. A lot of people want to see that done to him. What say you, TJ? You think we're going to see that? Is the hammer going to drop heavy on this traitor and his traitorous family with Aleister Crowley's daughter as his mother? What say you, TJ?
Well, first off, let me just reply to him. There's AI and there's II. There's artificial intelligence, and then there's just an idiot. And I said it twice, just an ignorant idiot. To be able to stand up there right next to somebody that just forfeited 20 years of fighting over to the people that we were fighting. We just completely gave the entire country to our enemies. They gave them $85 billion worth of equipment, our food, energy drinks, our clothes. You gave them the lists of the Americans and the people that helped us in the war to the Taliban. So they didn't even have to look for them. They just went there dressed up like Americans. You're an idiot. You are an idiot. To say something like that on 9/11, you already know the truth. You know the truth. That was internal. CIA, FBI had internal people in there completely instigating the whole event. It was set up. You had people inside dressed up, hanging stuff through the windows. You know what it was. And on top of that, it's already come out. And when Chris Wray was out there in front of Congress, he said, we can't really prosecute the people in the FBI that were working undercover. We know that they were there. And every video that you see of Trump supporters is them backing off the Antifa that are smashing the walls. They're backing them down. They're yelling at the cops, why aren't you doing something? Why aren't you doing something? As they peacefully walk through the Capitol, which is our Capitol. It's our Capitol.
Right. I mean, even Stuart Rhodes, who was supposed to be here tonight, who couldn't make it, the Oath Keepers that were there literally ran in the building as medics to help people who were injured and treated them. And then they got thrown in jail, which they remain today in prison in D.C. And all, no one's talking about it, except for this network here and a few others. But Lisa, I know you have something to add, because what TJ's saying is, yeah, they knew about it. All these people that were in the inside knew about it. I even will say, and I'll give her credit, the lovely Sybil Edmonds knew about the 9/11, tried to warn everyone as she was a CIA asset that day, and said, we have to stop this. We have to stop this. This was an inside ordeal here with many countries at play, but a handful with the authority. But Lisa, you wanted to add something to that. I can see it. Go ahead.
For that man to stand there today, of all days, and say that, when this, I'm going to share the screen, this was hanging in Jeffrey Epstein's house, because he knew he had things on everybody, and he knew the truth. So if there's any enemies domestically in America, it's the person that's painted on that picture right there.
It's like a joke for him, isn't it? It's like one big joke.
I would agree to that, Lisa. I would also add to that the Bush family of getting involved in the Franklin scandal that I studied, research, are heavily involved in that. I would also add to that the Bush family has an escape route to the country of Chile in South America, because they know their time's going to come in the sun here. I would also add to that in closing, because I could go on for just all night, that Daddy Bush, George Bush, Herbert Walker, is always infamous and notorious for saying, deny everything and admit to nothing.
Yeah.
If people found out what we have been doing behind the scenes, they would hang us. Well, he's damn right. He's damn right, and I hope to God that happened.
Well, remember the white envelopes. Remember the white envelopes.
Yeah, the white envelopes. But before we go on, why don't we take a few questions? We have a very responsive audience tonight, and we're so humbled to have this experience with everybody who's sharing this episode tonight with us.
What about the $2.3 trillion that they lost the day before?
Yeah, what about that, TJ? Where is that? In Don Rumsfeld's piggy bank, who just died not too long ago? Or what about Cheney? How's Cheney still alive with his fake heart? How's that penguin bastard still alive?
Well, they always tell the terrorists, if you're going to be a martyr, we'll take care of your family, right?
Yeah.
Jeez, man. So anyways, here's some questions here. This one is now, this is Missy Flores. She says, and now since we have so many unknown people coming into our country, election fraud, they are rolling out universal identification and social scores we will all line up for. Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of people coming into the UK right now.
That's not the only thing you've got to be worried about, because look what happened at the Ariana Grande thing in Manchester and the 7/7 thing in 2005 in the UK, which was like our little mini 9/11. It wasn't as many people casualties, but that's because they keep letting these people into the country.
But that's what the trouble is. People keep saying to us, why aren't you being generous and letting people come, these refugees come and move into your house? This is because of 9/11, because they don't come with "I'm a terrorist" tattooed on their t-shirts or what, printed on the t-shirts. And that's the truth. So you don't know who these are, and this is the issue with it. It's not like you don't want a house like true refugees.
And when you see them coming in like refugees, and it's like boats full of men, no women, no children, just young men constantly all the time. Come on.
Right, just all men. I want to address this question and nip it in the bud, as they say. Cherry Cole says, so, Dean, you're in your 40s. No, Cherry, I'm not. I just want to squash that rumor, and you should know. Here, Seth Black has a very intuitive question, per usual, and maybe one day, probably not tonight, he'll tell his 9/11 story at the Halloween party, what he decided to go as. Seth Black says, Department of Homeland Security last week said the biggest threat in America is white supremacy. So dumb. I also heard they said the second biggest threat are paper cuts and hangnails, too. So they're going to just be just taking everyone to court. And let's not forget what Jesse Ventura said, who is a real hero of getting this true story about 9/11 out. He said when he became governor in Minnesota, Jamie, they didn't know how he got there, like Trump. And Trump was his biggest backer. And he was taken to the basement of the Capitol building in Minnesota for the governors. And he was surrounded by Department of Homeland Security people, he said, that looked like every single everyday citizen you would see at a grocery store. So that was, 15 years ago? I can't even imagine how much, bigger the Department of Homeland Security has gotten. I mean, this is a manifested monster that is no end. Here's another one. Cherry Cole, you might redeem yourself here. Cherry Cole says, what did he write on the paper at the police station today? Does anybody know? TJ, you want to take that?
Was you talking about Trump?
Yes.
I didn't see that. I saw him going around to all the different police stations, and I saw one of them ask, are you going to come back in 2024? And he said, I can't answer that, but I think we're all going to be very happy.
Sure.
But I did not see what he wrote on the,
right. So here's what it is. In an update for people to understand is you see an attack on Texas happening right now. With the abortion angle, and then you see the other angle of the immigration and the power, all this stuff. Texas is the target because the people in charge right now, they want to justify allowing foreign interventionist peacekeepers, troops, UN, NATO. They need to justify to let them in through our coastal states like California and New York and so forth, and Michigan. That's why Michigan's key. And they want to justify it by saying exactly what Seth Black stated there, that the biggest threat in the country is white supremacy. And they're going to cling to that narrative come hell or high water. They're not going to let go because they want their ground war. And TJ, what I'm saying is, it appears that before the T-Man, as Matthew Short calls him, returns, I think two things need to happen. Is number one, there has to be a market crash, because he cannot take the blame. He's a guy who liquidates. Number two, they need to set up the country in a defense position for when we have the foreign troops come into America, when you know who comes back or when the militias stand up. That's what we're seeing right now. This is who's going to draw first on the grassy knoll right now. This is a very dangerous time in American history, but I can feel it. But you know what? We have the momentum on our side. 20 years in the making, if not more, since Kennedy. So a lot of great questions here. Why don't we just take one more and then we'll give our final thoughts, and then I'll tell my 9/11 story that's just out of this world, because now's the night to do it. Well, this is very interesting here on a spiritual level. Kim Kemp says, Satan tried to come through the clouds the other night here in San Diego. Everything, the moon or whatever, started to peek out. Lightning would strike. True story. Kim Kemp, I would say Satan is in the fake White House with the green screen behind them now. But he might have been in San Diego as well. Julianne Ferguson says, Bush makes me sick to my stomach. Well, yes, he makes us all sick to our stomach. Here's another one. On the spiritual realm, DeanRyan says, it's not going to get any better. Please, everyone, it's all prophecy coming to pass. We're living in a last chapter of Revelations. We don't have much longer. Jesus comes through the clouds, and Satan knows this time very short. I feel like I'd like to respond to that because, and if anyone else would like to do so, feel free, is there's a reason I think they're playing up to the Revelations aspect because they believe that, first of all, it's an artificial revelations. Okay, I don't think back in the Old Testaments and in the Bible they had the cloud machine and the harp, all that stuff. In my view, that's being done so Christians will lay down and just say, "Oh, we're going to die anyways. We're all going to heaven. Why fight it?"
They're not going to die. It's not a death. It's not. They're not going to die.
Right. Right. So, but what I'm saying is it's almost done as a pacify method so Christians won't fight back. And then you have the DHS now who have clergy response teams as of 2005 going back to Katrina. Clergy response teams, people like Rick Warren, the reverend or whatever minister who signed in Obama on his fake Bible there, the coloring book, part of the CFR, all these people. In the clergy response teams, they cite Romans 13 to lay down your weapons and follow the government. So that's how I feel about it. If anyone feels otherwise, speak now.
Can you hear me okay?
Either way, to be honest.
Yeah, TJ, we hear you just fine.
Okay, so I was just going to say this. Two things I want to say real quick. About the economy crashing. I don't buy that. And the only reason I don't buy that is when Trump came into office, the market was at 18,000. He brought it up to almost 30. During his presidency with the pandemic, it went back down to 18. He brought it back up, even during a pandemic. So that he knows how to do because he does it correctly. They're doing it incorrectly and faux. The last part is, I am a religious person, and I just want to ask everybody out there, what do we know? What do we know? How do we know what it looks like when Jesus comes back? What do we know? How do we know what that looks like? We don't know.
No.
Right.
The pain he went through and the sacrifice he made for all of our sins. We don't know what it looks like when he comes back. He could be here already working this whole thing and show his face. We don't know what it looks like. This is where you just, you live in the word. You do your prayers, you be proactive, not retroactive, because it may already be happening. It might already be here. So we don't know what that looks like. That's why we have to stay in the faith and together.
Well,
I just want to say that.
Like the old song says, hey, what if God was one of us? So I think TJ's echoing the songs of yesteryear.
But whether or not this is revelations in the end times or it's just
You can't sit
faked, it doesn't matter. You've got to fight anyway, because as long as you're doing the right thing and you're not giving into the evil, you'll be saved.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. As long as you're doing the right thing and you're following Jesus, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you've still got to go and do your part.
You still got, yeah.
Sure.
You can't just sit
And,
back.
I've never seen anything like it, because we have some Christians here tonight. And I got to be honest with you, is being raised Catholic, like myself, 8 years of Catholic school, we know nothing about Bibles, except for we have one, but we don't know where we placed it. But I got to tell you, I have seen atheists, I have seen people who never even dabbled in religion before come out and either convert to Christianity or defend it, limb for limb here, because there's something about Christianity, that particular religion, that has these people, up in a fit, you know what I mean? And I really think it's because that Christianity has been almost a beacon of light of some sort of democracy throughout the world compared to the other ones, if you think about it. And that's not what they want. So a lot of people are defending it.
That's why they vilify it, because they're scared of it.
Yeah.
They only vilify it when it's a threat to them.
Yeah, and if you're an atheist or you're a Christian, I always say to myself, every single day of my life, I know I'm right. But my question to you is, in your darkest hour, or if your loved one's going to be lost, do you hope you're wrong, or do you hope you're right?
Exactly.
And if they don't know, that's.
Well, it's just, to me, I see from the art of war standpoint why they're playing up to the revelations, to really get Christians to lay down. I want to take on this question. This is from Nurse Jane. I feel very obligated to answer this, and thank you, Nurse Jane, for stating this. Nurse Jane says, "Go look up Rebecca Roth on YouTube. She's a flight attendant who wrote the book 9/11. Very eye-opening." Okay. I was part of the ensemble years back, along with Mike Adams, who outed that Rebecca Roth, her fake name. She's not a flight attendant of any sorts, and she was masquerading as one. We outed her. She is a CIA asset. Go look into the 2014 timeline and
yeah. I was actually watching something similar. There was also one person who survived out of part of the building where it all collapsed, and apparently he just hid in one little tiny corner of the stairs, and pushed someone else out of the way and things like that, trying to save him apparently, and they died. And he was a CIA operative as well. And that was that's a bit suspicious. Never heard that until years later. And you think, there was quite a few of them plotted about the place.
Very convenient.
Yeah.
Well, think about
the bandana.
Yeah.
Well, think about some of the things that we have seen in the FOIA requests, where we see the firefighters coming out of the Twin Towers saying the bombs were going off, and they had all the soot on them, everything. But
look what's happened in the 20 years since. We've been vilified in the 20 years since. The police, we went in, and they were heroes. In 2001, they were heroes because they were running in as everybody else was running out. And Rudy Giuliani, who was a hero in New York, he's now being completely vilified by the media. Yeah. Because these people know the truth.
Well, not only that, Lisa, let me add to that, and TJ, feel free to just jump in, that the EPA, I believe, said, oh, it's totally cool. Go towards ground zero and just burn. You don't need a mask. Just go there. Everything's fine. Breathe it in. Take a deep breath when you get there and call us and start stretching. Well, they were wrong, weren't they? And then all the people that got sick there, they're not even allowed to go to the 9/11 memorial every year in New York. They're shut out. So anyways, I have a major story I'm going to share tonight on 9/11 and give you some insight to behind the scenes. That's something you probably haven't heard about, and some things that I was a part of just a few years back. But I'm going to reserve that for my final thoughts. So we're going to do our final thoughts here. And what a night it's been, TJ. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to really have this intellectual conjecture of sorts and this tennis match of colleagues to have you back tonight, especially on a very significant night like tonight. So why don't we do our final thoughts? And I'm going to give our TJ, our colleague, our compadre, who's back with us tonight, final thoughts. TJ.
Well, this show is about, never forget 9/11, and it's something that touched all of us, and all of us are patriots. We love this country. We love all frontline workers. We love teachers. We love neighbors. We love everyone. I don't have hate in my heart for anyone, only for those who have wronged me, and even then I try to forgive. But if you consistently try to take away my freedoms, take away my kids' freedoms, and turn me into a country that I never, ever, ever, ever signed a contract of communism or joining any CCP type thing, that's not for me. You will always be my enemy. The people that want to be in this country, that love this country, stay here.
Mm-hmm. Very, very, very heartfelt, TJ. Thank you for that wonderful final thought. Next up, we're going to get our Lisa and Jamie's Life Matters, our producers here at Real Deal Media, for their final thoughts on this 9/11 20th anniversary. Go ahead, the Duthies.
Jamie's Life Matters can go first.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Right. My final thought is, the question is, we will never forget 9/11, and we don't. Obviously, we haven't yet anyway, even though we may be forced to by these certain people. But there was a question I did notice before. I think it was on Facebook that somebody said, "Have we got stronger since this date?" And actually, we were stronger, but I think it's going a bit the other way now because of we're being, censored and manipulated so much, and we've got to remember this day and actually use that strength to move forward and fight back hard.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Very good.
This date right here, this was a date that the world should have stood together and not been forced apart. These people, what he said today, what Bush said today about people being enemies and what they like, white supremacists are the enemies. They're not. The enemy of America and the enemy of the whole world is the media. Stop watching it.
Yeah.
Because all they're doing is they're dividing us. Where this date was tragic. It was one of the biggest tragedies in our lifetime since Pearl Harbor. It was tragic. And it should have brought us together, and we should have stayed together.
Right.
And can I to say my thoughts are with those people who's finding today very difficult because they've lost loved ones and friends and family through this.
My heart still, every September 11th, since that day, my heart still breaks for people in America for what they went through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it will continue to break.
Very sad indeed. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to give my final thought in a story realm of a thought that's finalized. TJ, thank you, and it's good seeing you again. And Lisa, the Duthies, thank you for your final thought. And the wonderful spin-off show called The Duthies coming to Real Deal Media in the winter season.
TV screen near you.
The Duthies Christmas special. I can't wait. Thank you, TJ. I'll talk to you after the show in a bit. And thank you, the Duthies. So I'm going to give my final thoughts in a story form because I think this is one of those stories that you can only tell on 9/11, kind of like the Nightmare Before Christmas and all those other classics. Well, this one hits home because the two people in the story are no longer with us, and that's Ed Asner and one of my favorites, Mr. Jim Marrs. So it came about Sean Stone, who wanted to be here tonight, but he's traveling, and he sends his well wishes. Well, Sean and I, we've done projects off and on over the course of, almost 10 years now. Well, the question was, Sean, you are the prodigy of Oliver Stone. You are supposed to take the mantle that your father in the bar that he set, you're supposed to take it and run with it, right? And I know he agrees, and he listens to a lot. What I said, the only next thing to do accordingly, and which makes the most sense, is to do the 9/11 movie after we had the JFK movie that your father did, and it changed the entire narrative. It changed the scene. It was so explosive, that movie, that congressmen and senators all alike were calling for the boycott of it across the theaters in America. In fact, I remember Jim Marrs, who I spent a lot of time with, they repaved that entire road in Dealey Plaza in Dallas before they filmed it there, just to give you an example. So I said, we have to do something. Now, this came about. Now, I don't want to take all the credit. We were at a dinner in 2015, and Ed Asner, who we were friends with at that time, happened to be there, and he said to me and Sean, he planted this idea in our head because he was in JFK, the film. He was right in the beginning of it. He was a general, hard role to play. But he said to us, you guys are the young guys and stuff. You take this, and this story needs to be told. Every aspect of it. Like, this is only a fraction of what we covered tonight. So we agreed to do it. And at that dinner, believe it or not, was Judd Nelson from Breakfast Club. And Tales from the Crypt, I guess, some other notables. And he was going to do it, but then he backed out because it's a dangerous film to make. Because when you make films like this, you put skin in the game, you become the Hollywood darling like Oliver Stone when he made Platoon and all those other movies, to becoming the controversial director, the controversial filmmaker. I don't want to, be part of that now. It's not cool anymore to be controversial. It's not cool anymore to be in a band and have an attitude problem. They're like, oh, what's wrong with you? What are you, about racist? Anyways, so this was Ed's idea. And I said, you know what, Ed? I want to reunite the cast of JFK. At least some of them. I want to reunite Jim Mars, whose book Crossfire was used for JFK, and I want to reunite him with Oliver. I want to reunite Ed Asner with Jim and everybody and some of the other players. But I want to bring some new blood to it. And we brought Dylan Avery, who was, as you saw, Jessie's boyfriend for a little while. And we had a harmonious group, and we were going to do the 9/11 movie the way it should have been told. Not all these puff pieces, like Whoopi Goldberg made one. The way it should be told, of who was behind it. How about the dancing Israelis that were just loading up the bombs in the Twin Towers all the nights before that no one seems to remember or nor want to talk about? How about the Saudi Arabian trial right now in the New York federal courts that are, the families are suing the government of Saudi Arabia? Not Afghanistan, notice that? So what about all these stories? So Dylan and Jim Mars, all myself, we had a script to go. We had a script. Ed was all about it. Ed wanted to go out, Ed Asner, on his high horse, on a high note. And he was one of the first. I have to give him credit. The man had courage. His politics were a little sideways, but he's old school. He had courage. He came out and said exactly what we all think about today, that 9/11 was totally, without a shadow of a doubt, an inside job. At least to the point where the narrative is just a bunch of garbage. We can all agree on that. Because I know there's a lot of people, you get into the political sporting event of 9/11, how it happened, who died, who didn't. That's all good and fine for the nerds of society. But we know deep down inside that didn't happen the way they said it would. So we were set to do this movie. We were set to do it. We had letters of intent. We were all geared up to do it. We were ready for the backlash. We were ready for the saboteurs. And to my dismay and many of others, Jim Mars had a very untimely passing before we even really got started filming. And it just sunk us, because Jim Mars, if you don't know who he is, I cannot recommend that you go to the people who started the truth movements when there was no internet. They had to use newsletters. They had to speak in private groups. It was dangerous back then to talk like this. It still is now, but they didn't have the tools that we did. These were the people like Jim Mars that set up and paved the road for people like myself, people like TJ, people like Lisa, Jamie's Life Matters, all of us that never got their time in the sun, never got their credit. And I felt, as someone who was just admiring these people, this was their moment. So we got the film, and we couldn't do it because Jim Mars he untimely passed. But I'll tell you this, and then I'll end with Jim Mars. But in this film that we were studying and preparing to do, this would have been the comeback of all comebacks, if you want to call it that, for Oliver Stone since JFK. This would have been the golden peak moment for Ed Asner and Jim Mars. Is I met a woman named Michelle Little, and she lost her brother in the Twin Towers. And she lives in San Diego, and she was not getting answers. Is he alive? Is he dead? What's going on here? Nobody was giving her answers. So 2 weeks into it, about 10 to 14 days into it, she traveled to New York to go find her brother, who she was close with. She lived in San Diego. Her brother was still working in the financial district over there at the World Trade Center in New York. And nobody knew whether he was dead or alive or anything. So she took matters in her own hand. So she goes down there to the World Trade Center within a 2-week time frame. She buys the construction boots because there's rubble, there's everything. It is a disaster zone. And she tells me this. We have it on film somewhere. The bottom of the soles of her shoes, 2 weeks after 9/11, were melted. She couldn't believe it. They were melted. As she was going around trying to look for her brother, there was a Marine that stopped her and said, "Don't you dare cross that line." She goes, "Why?" He goes, "You see that up there? That's a sniper. He's going to shoot you." And then she looked closer. What she saw was a gold heist, meaning the distraction of everything happening in the scene there in the World Trade Center. There was gold that was being taken out of that plaza of sorts, or a bank, and it was being facilitated by the United States military on some level. Now, I know what some of you are probably saying, or just people like me, it's the exact plot for Die Hard 3. If you haven't seen it, it's word for word, verbatim. Distraction to then confiscate the gold. So this country was definitely looted. It was gutted on 9/11. And the people that laid their skin on the line, their courage, people like Jim Mars, people like Ed Asner, even people like Jim Fetzer, this is their moment to know. And I wish Jim was here. And it's sad that Jim Mars passed, because he would have loved to see what we all are feeling right now, a harmonious understanding of the nature of reality that they worked hard on providing for us. So tonight's episode, in my closing final statement, I want to dedicate to the courageous people who have been the true storytellers of history, modern history, even ancient history. But those people that never got the credit just because they're not that savvy with technology, and they're older now and people don't want to listen to them, whatever the case may be. We would not be here. I would not be here if it wasn't for people like Jim Mars, like a Jim Fetzer, like an Oliver Stone, who made me look inside and find the courage to overcome that peer pressure of looking past the control grid and seeing who really has the hidden hand and who's controlling it. So we are where we are today, and understanding because of these people. And on this 20th anniversary, I want to give credit where credit's due. And so I'm dedicating tonight to Jim Mars, who I wish could be here. And it's sad that he's not, but we're carrying on his legacy here at Real Deal Media every single day. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight on a very special occasion. It's not easy, but that's life isn't easy. So thank you for Lisa, for TJ. I want to thank you again for sharing your night, and we'll see you again in the days to come. And just always remember to stay tuned, stay awake. Good night, everybody.